the Acadia Broadcasting Network. I'm David Campbell.
And I'm Don Mills.
Well, Don, we had a very good conversation today with Sean Leet, the managing director and CEO of World Energy GH2, the company that is fairly well along on the green hydrogen project slated for Western Newfoundland and around the Stephenville community and port. I think this is a very, very interesting project, and I think people in our region need to get up to speed with this because it's happening, it's moving quickly, and this is going to be, in many ways, a generational change for some of the communities in our region if these projects go ahead. But we're starting with this one in Western Newfoundland.
Yes, and World Energy is, I believe, one of four hydrogen projects currently in one level development in Newfoundland and Labrador alone. We've done two other podcasts with other proponents of green hydrogen, including Bear Head and Everwind at the Strait of Canso area, and they're all along their processes. But this one seems closer than the ones that we've talked to. They looks like they've done a lot of the hard work to be ready to go once they get the environmental approval. And as Sean said on the podcast, they anticipate getting that in the first quarter of this year, and that means that they will be beginning construction in 2024, with some plan, I believe, around 2027 to have hydrogen being produced in time to export that hydrogen to Germany, where they have contracts basically signed. So this looks very real. They have a fairly strong number of employees already working. I believe 47 people already work for World Energy. So, this looks like the closest to reality based on what we've heard so far.
Yes, and it's like any large industrial project. So, if a pulp mill was going to go in, it would need to use a large amount of the wood fiber in the region. If you were going to do a fishing project, it would require a lot of the fish stock. The only difference in this case is they're actually taking advantage of a renewable resource, which is the wind. So, yes, there's going to be, and he told us 160 turbines. That's a lot of turbines
In the first
um,
phase.
in
In
the
the
first
first phase.
phase. So that will be a lot of wind energy, a lot of wind turbines. But again, it's a large industrial project that's going to create many good-paying jobs and really create an injection of economic activity we haven't seen in that part of Newfoundland in many decades, really. And a lot of people seem to be quite excited about it, according to what Sean was saying.
I just want to point out one other thing that I think is really important in this project. There's a guy by the name of John Risley involved, and John is a big visionary. Has accomplished at least three major ventures during his very successful career. And the one thing I know about John, I know him a little bit, is that he's very aggressive. And the fact that they are where they are, I can bet it's because John's pushing hard to take advantage of this opportunity. So, that actually should bring another level of confidence, because he has a great track record in success in developing businesses, and this is just another one, I guess. But you're in a better position to talk about the economic impacts, because you actually did that study. So tell our listeners what you learned as a result of the work that you did for World Energy.
Yeah, so in the interest of full disclosure, I was hired a few months ago to do an economic impact report, and it was a thorough piece because we hadn't seen anything like this in Canada before. So we couldn't just apply the normal multipliers that you apply to industries such as this. So I work with Stats Canada. We broke out a lot of the imports and so on. But at the end of the day, just the construction activity, just the phase one activity is going to generate something like $2.5 billion in GDP for the province, hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue. It's going to create or support somewhere around 4,000 jobs during construction, hundreds of jobs in ongoing operations through direct, indirect, and induced effects. So again, certainly a serious economic engine for the province. It's not going to replace the oil and gas sector, but it's certainly going to be another energy sector that's going to enhance and support the economy in Newfoundland and Labrador. Certainly, certainly the biggest project in that part of Newfoundland and Labrador in probably I don't know, maybe 100 years. I don't know, a long time.
Well, you and I are excited by the green hydrogen opportunity across the region. We've talked to a couple in Nova Scotia who are pursuing the same dream, I guess. The Port of Baldoon is talking about creating a green energy hub through small modular reactors for export. There's a lot of activity. Not all of it will come true, but the fact that so many are under development now, gives us all some confidence that this could be a significant industry for this region, largely because, as you know, the podcast we did with Peter Nicholson, Catching the Wind, we have renewable wind like nobody else in Canada. It is a real resource, not just for the production of green energy, by the way, but for the production of green hydrogen, sorry, but for the production of green energy for export, especially if we get into the offshore wind. So, this is just further cementing, in my view, what a transformational industry that this could be for Atlantic Canada.
Yeah, but Sean actually teased us about use
Hmm.
cases for the use of that energy in
Right,
Atlantic Canada. Because
right,
one of the big chunks of cost to developing green hydrogen is that you have to convert it to a liquid fuel and then ship it on tanks to Europe. So that's quite a
right,
cost. So he
right.
teased us and said, well, what if you did green steel, or what if you actually used that hydrogen into manufacturing processes here in Atlantic Canada? So you could actually start to see manufacturing plants in Newfoundland and Labrador, but even in Nova Scotia, taking advantage of the offshore wind that produces green hydrogen that is necessary in the production, in the industrial production. So the thing is that you can't replace green hydrogen. You can't replace liquid fuels in some of these manufacturing processes like steel. You can't use direct electricity. You need a fuel, and the hydrogen is going to replace, well, it's going to replace coal, or it's going to replace natural gas. So I think that's really, really exciting that not only are we looking at this huge potential energy source, but potentially actually using that energy to power new manufacturing or new industrial activity, green industrial activity in the maritime provinces in Atlantic Canada.
And again, Peter Nicholson mentioned that when we had him on the podcast, that this is much like the development of electricity in Quebec, which created the aluminum manufacturing sector because they had access to cheap energy, and when you have green energy, which is going to be a sought after commodity, people will consider locating their manufacturing facilities to this region if they have access to it. So that's the other thing that a lot of people haven't yet cotton on to.
All right. Well, with that as our introduction, here is our conversation with Sean Leet, Managing Director and CEO of World Energy GH2.
We're pleased to welcome Sean Leet, the Managing Director and CEO of the World Energy GH2, to our podcast. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, David. Pleased to be here.
Yeah, so before we start talking about World Energy, we want to find out a little bit about yourself, kind of your career path to your current role. We understand that you have had a relationship with John Risley that precedes your current role. Be interested in learning a little bit more about that. But if you can tell us kind of your background and how did you end up where you are?
Sure, happy to. Originally from the eastern shore of Nova Scotia, and started my career as a cadet when I was about 16 years old with Secunda Marine. My grandfather and my uncle had founded Secunda Marine, and was started working during high school breaks and then into university during breaks on the ships in the summer season. And it was a great start to my career. Moved into warehouse operations and then eventually into the office at Secunda. Spent 13 years there and had a wonderful experience. Very entrepreneurial organization, and it was quite exciting to be part of it. That entrepreneurial experience rubbed off on me and then I went and started a ship repair company. We did a lot of ship repair type of work at Secunda, and I enjoyed it. So I started a ship repair company and ran that for 5 years, and sold to my partners, and then went to work for JD Irving, running their marine business, and did that for about 10 years up in St. John, and the entrepreneurial bug bit again. And I co-founded Horizon Maritime with a friend of mine from Secunda Marine, and we were fortunate enough after about a year to attract John Risley as an investor in Horizon Maritime as a partner in the business, and it's been a wonderful partnership. Horizon's focused on sustainability. We do a lot of work in the offshore energy industry, floating wind turbine installations, fixed wind turbine installations in the offshore. And we've developed a strong network in the renewables space. John is a partner in World Energy LLC in the United States with a gentleman named Gene Gabolis. And Gene founded World Energy LLC on Earth Day 25 years ago, just over 25 years ago now. They have biofuels manufacture production facilities, and are into some large scale renewables projects. They are also one of the only manufacturers of sustainable aviation fuel in the world, and they had a requirement to green up their product, and went and talked to their partner Air Products, one of the largest industrial gas suppliers in the world. And Air Products had told them, look, we're building a project in Saudi Arabia, Neom, and it'll be the first commercially produced green hydrogen. So if you want green hydrogen, you're going to have to figure out how to manufacture it yourself. And from there, John and I went over to Holland, to the Netherlands, where one of our partners in Horizon Maritime has a renewables energy academy that services customers like Shell and BP, and he put on a crash course for us, if you will. So we learned about what was important, and realized very quickly that on the west coast of the island here in Newfoundland, where I'm based now, there's a massive wind resource, and it became evident that there was a very unique site there that held a world-class opportunity for a project of this nature. So that was December 2021 when John and I traveled to Europe to get educated. Came back and started to put the pieces together. This is John's idea, his brainchild. Gene became involved in the business, and Brendan Paddock as well, who's a longtime friend and partner of John's and other businesses. So I've moved to St. John's, excuse me, 8 years ago now, and that was largely to open Horizon Maritime's head office here. And it was I was with I was CEO of Horizon until November of 2022. And at that point, we had bootstrapped the hydrogen project to the point that we knew that we had something special. We decided to stand up an organization in the province with the community office in Stephenville and our head office here in St. John's, and start to bring some people on board to transition from the consultants that had helped us identify the opportunity and bootstrap the business from the start. So we're here in St. John's now, and excited about moving the project forward.
So I didn't realize Fred Smithers is your grandfather. Is that right?
Sorry, my grandfather is J.D. Mitchell. Was he's passed now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because well, obviously Fred had a long involvement with Secunda, obviously as well.
Absolutely.
So you've given us a little bit of an overview of World Energy, but so the company's obviously only been around for a short period of time. Do you have a staff of people working for the company now?
We do. We have 47 people working for the company in various locations. We have 4 in Stephenville, based out of the community office, and then there's a staff of 5 people at the Port of Stephenville, which we own and operate now. The rest of the folks are either based here in St. John's at the head office at 235 Water, some of them working remotely and come here on a periodic basis.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Port of Stephenville. I was really curious. One of the first things that you did was to purchase that port. Obviously, there were strategic reasons involved in that purchase. Can you just tell us why that is such an important part of your project?
Yeah, the Port of Stephenville is quite unique, it being one of the only private ports in Canada, and globally with respect to an industry like we're entering into now or working to stand up now. It's a very unique asset. It being built by the Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, um, and built to a very high standard. It's still in excellent condition. The channel is a deep water channel. The turning basin is equally as deep at 10 meters, and it's a large large acreage alongside the port facility. So we've got 400 acres there, and that's enough to fit the entire hydrogen ammonia plant footprint in for the phase one of the project. There's a large fresh water supply that used to service the paper mill that was there after the U.S. military had it, and that water supply is more than enough water than we require for the initial phases of the project. Couple that with the massive onshore wind resource that's extremely unique, unlike wind resource that's seen anywhere in the world from an onshore perspective, and existing transmission corridors that are close by. A wonderful stakeholder base there that's extremely supportive of the project and looking for the economic advantages that this will offer the region. It really makes for a unique opportunity, and that water supply is key in other areas. You don't have that very commonly next to a facility like the Port of Stephenville, and in a lot of these areas where you do have uh, a high level of resources, whether it's wind or solar, they have to desalinate the water and they have to use renewable energy to do that in order to maintain a high CI score, and to be certified as green hydrogen.
Now, Sean, this is a big project. To get to production, do you have a cost estimate of how much it's going to cost you to get to production? And perhaps how will that big number be financed?
We're looking for the phase one of the project, which is 1 gigawatt of wind, and we'll have approximately 550 megawatts of electrolyzer capacity, generating about 400 tons of green ammonia annually. That will cost, current capex estimate is in the order of 6 billion Canadian dollars. The estimates are still being refined, of course, and will continue to be until we get to final investment decision.
Right.
Financing plans, to your question, there are well advanced. The, the European ECAs, export credit agencies, are key to the financing. As you can appreciate, a lot of this equipment is manufactured in Europe, and the ECAs offer quite attractive terms should you be buying equipment from the countries that they represent, and that provides a bit of a foundation for the financing. Obviously, we've got a very strong partner in SK on board already in the project, who intends to be part of the ongoing financing effort, and we're involved with a Canadian chartered bank and also some international financing institutions, names that you would recognize, to help round out that picture.
Hmm.
We want to ask you specifically about the number of turbines and things like that in a minute. But the first question I have for you is, can you tell our listeners what is green hydrogen and what are its uses?
Sure. Well, green hydrogen, the actual molecule itself, is no different than gray or blue hydrogen. But the green hydrogen is generated using 100% renewable energy. If you have a grid connection to support the balancing of the electrolyzers, like every project will have, that's generating green hydrogen. So obviously the wind doesn't blow all the time, and you need that backup load, that balancing load. The grid connection must be supplying over 90% green hydrogen to meet the EU rules. So that's quite an important piece as well. So green is the purest form. It's the most expensive form to generate. It takes large amounts of electricity and significant quantities of fresh water as well. That compared to so consider green the gold standard, if you will, not to throw too many colors into the equation. Gray hydrogen is the traditional method of producing hydrogen, typically through steam methane reforming process, and that emits carbon into the atmosphere. So not ideal and not going to help us to get where we need to get in short order in the fight against climate change. Blue hydrogen is another color in the spectrum that simply produces in the same manner as gray hydrogen, but the carbon will be captured. And there's advances in that technology that are advancing as well. Somewhat capital intensive, but there's a lot of merits to the blue hydrogen. And there's some other colors on the spectrum that are developing, such as pink from nuclear. There's still a lot of questions around that, as you can appreciate. But again, back to green hydrogen, it's the gold standard, and it's where the focus is for decarbonization in the EU principally at this time.
And what are some of its uses? I know it's used in industrial uses, but what are the future uses of the fuel?
Well, it's certainly used in the refining process. We've got refineries, large refining companies that are looking for sources of green hydrogen now. They're using hydrogen in their operations. Steel making is another emerging offtake market that's moving extremely quickly, being led by a company called H2 Green Steel out of Sweden. And they need significant amounts of green power plus green hydrogen to use to work a DRI, direct reduced iron process, to make the green hydrogen without the significant emissions from the steel industry, which are currently 7% of global emissions on an annual basis. Marine's another one. Green ammonia engines are well under development. In fact, they're essentially to a commercial state this year, and will be installed in vessels. So we expect the marine sector to be a significant off-taker, especially on the back of the changes that the International Maritime Organization has made recently. So there's and then transportation is another use for hydrogen as well. Some of the countries in the Far East are looking at it for power generation, which is maybe not the highest and best use of the product, but they need it to decarbonize. So there's a number of discussions underway. Eventually, or as soon as possible, we desire to see some value added to the product before it leaves the island. And if you think about the steel industry and the opportunity there, shipping hydrogen is extremely expensive. So if you can co-locate a DRI facility next to the production of the fuel, it makes a lot of sense. And this is what H2 Green Steel is working on in Sweden. But they are shipping the ore from Labrador, because we have such a high quality ore in Labrador. So you can draw some conclusions that there would be some unique advantages to having that ore from the province processed, on the island here, and then shipped from there.
So just if I could jump in there, so you're saying there may be an opportunity to attract the manufacturing that actually is, or the industrial uses that are actually going to use the green energy rather than shipping it to Europe?
Yes, I mean, ultimately, at present, Europe is the initial destination for the offtake, and we want to support the Canada, Germany hydrogen alliance and fulfill our commitment to Germany and the EU, and stand up the industry and initiate that part of the supply chain. But as we build out the project, and we've got significant capacity within the port footprint and the surrounding areas for wind generation, you're probably aware we have 4 gigawatts of crown land awarded, or crown land, 4 different sites where we can build approximately a gigawatt on each site, so a total of 4 gigawatts. So that'll allow us to, eventually supply green ammonia, perhaps green hydrogen in liquid form. There's some technology being developed there to Europe and other regions, and then also divert some of that to a local supply for a value add product such as green steel.
That's just exciting, exceptionally exciting. So I'm glad you could tell us
Yeah.
about it. But we did want
Yeah.
to ask you a little bit about the geography here, the size of the scope of the project. Can you give us, first of all, can you pronounce the name of the project? I understand you've taken an indigenous name for the project. Can you pronounce that for our listeners?
Sure. Yeah, we're proud of the name. The name was chosen by a senior First Nations individual on the island, and it stands for, or it means in Mi'kmaq, where the sand blows, which is the original name for Bay St. George. So it's Project New Geohonic is
Geohonic.
the pronunciation.
Hmm. Thank you. Can you tell us, at least in phase one, how many wind turbines are we talking about?
It's roughly 160. We're still, as you may appreciate, working through various stages of the design and optimization. And we're in discussions with the major wind turbine manufacturers. We need a class one turbine for this site due to the turbulence and the strength of the wind, which is great. There's three manufacturers in particular globally that can manufacture turbines for us, and each of them has a different model. So one may be suggesting a 6 megawatt turbine, another may be suggesting a 7.2 megawatt turbine, which obviously has an effect along with the optimization of the plant and those various inputs that we're working through on the amount of turbines that will eventually be at on the initial site.
Are you able to take advantage of old logging roads, things like that in the area?
Potentially, yeah. It's there's a lot of trails within the areas that we're looking at, as you may appreciate. So there's the potential for that. A lot of this work is still ongoing and being refined. So we'll have to see where all that works itself out over the coming months.
Could I just jump in on a question? Because you're going to get 1 gigawatt of power in the first phase, right? That's what I think I heard you say that. Are there times where you don't need all that power and you can feed some of it into the grid?
So that's a great question. First of all, I'll say the nameplate capacity, if you want to look at it that way, for the wind farm will be approximately 1 gigawatt.
Right.
That in the region, that gives us about a 50% capacity factor, which is significant. So at times of the year, in the winter months, we're going to have the turbines generating, a gigawatt of wind power, and the plant will be sized according to the capacity factor of the wind, blended with the amount of power that we're going to be able to secure from the grid, plus some energy storage, which we'll have available to help with the balancing as well. So we think it's going to be about 550 megawatts of electrolyzer capacity. There are times during the winter where we will have excess power that we can potentially supply to the grid, and that's a conversation that we hope to have at some point in the near future with NL Hydro when they're ready to have that discussion. Otherwise, that power is we'll store as much as we can, but it'll be curtailed otherwise.
Right.
Before I turn it back to Don, I just had one other question on this theme, and that is around the timing. So phase one, if everything goes well, you get your environmental approvals. It's my understanding that you would actually start construction this year in 2024. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then, do you have a rough timeline for us around the additional phases? Is that like a long term, like a 30-year thing, or would that be within the next few years? What's the just the rough timeline if you were looking at those additional phases?
So the EIS that we're working through currently, the environmental impact statement, we're working on the amendment now based on the additional information that the Environmental Assessment Committee has requested, is for the first two sites. So the Port-au-Port site and the Codroy site, which are about 1 gigawatt nameplate capacity wind farms each. We would begin. Port-au-Port site is phase one, and the Codroy site is phase two, but they're both wrapped up in the current application. So should we be released, or when we're released, let's say, we would start progressing construction on the Port-au-Port site as the priority, but we'd also be working in parallel on the Codroy site.
John, there are lots of places around the world looking at green energy. By our account, probably 30 countries with serious plans under development from the United States to Australia, Egypt, Mozambique, Kazakhstan. In your own province, there's other projects. There's a couple in Nova Scotia, you know, and you know, we've been told that Atlantic Canada has an advantage in wind. We're good at something. Wind is one of them. But I guess a bigger question is: does it matter how many people get in this business right now, or is demand insatiable for hydrogen? And there's really it's not a competition who's going to be first, but there's just a competition to get the projects going. Is that what it is?
Yeah, so it depends who you talk to, and it's interesting. You know, the big analysts like McKinsey and Argus and WoodMac, they've all shifted their perspective over the last couple of years since we started looking at this industry around the supply and demand discussion.
Mm.
And there's still a lot of people out there that have significantly differing opinions on what that balance will look like, or imbalance. Our view, and this is the view that's shared by more and more companies, I think, as time goes on, at least the ones that we're speaking to, and the analysts such as Argus seem to be reflecting this now as well, is there's going to be a significant undersupply of green hydrogen for the foreseeable future into 2035 and perhaps beyond. And you know, that would seem to make sense when you look at the position that the International Maritime Organization has taken, the EU Renewable Energy Directive, the latest iteration of that, number 3. You know, these are some significant targets that have been implemented, and there's going to be penalties associated with those for the companies that aren't taking action and aren't able to meet those targets. Green hydrogen is going to be a key to the decarbonization effort and meeting those targets. And it's we've seen a lot of projects on the drawing board. A lot of these projects are quote unquote suitcase projects. There's very few that are erecting meteorological evaluation towers, which is, you need to do that. You can't rely on satellite data to design your wind turbines, and it's not financeable. You need the physical wind data. So we've got a year's worth of wind data now on the Port-au-Port site. We've got towers up on Codroy. Some of our the other project in Atlantic Canada are erecting towers as well. But you know, globally, you can there's a very small number that are actually moving forward and spending money, and that's not just on the towers. That's things like getting the infrastructure place, acquiring the Port of Stephenville, for example. So projects that are spending money and doing the things they need to do to really advance the project, versus the 450, I think McKinsey's last count was, that are on the drawing board, are very few and far between. So when the realization is now coming that there will be very few projects generating green hydrogen by 2027, 28, when the infrastructure is going to be ready in Europe to receive the product, and there will be a significant undersupply. So that seems to be where things are heading at present, and the likely eventuality of what we're going to see.
Yeah, you know, I wanted to ask you about the you know, the wind. You mentioned that the wind in the western part of Newfoundland is a great resource. Can you give us some sense of how good the wind is? Like, I don't know how you do this. Like, you know, it's it's constant. It's at a high. You know, how do you determine? You're doing it with the wind towers, obviously, but for our listeners, you know, why is the Western Newfoundland so good for wind?
Well, it starts with the wind speeds and then the capacity factor. So the wind
Right.
speeds range on our sites from 9.7 meters per second to 11.4 meters per second, which is significant by any standard. But it's probably best summed up for your audience with a very short story. At the end of March, I think March 28th, 2022, we had a number of people that were interested in the project come to the site, and we took them out on one of the Horizon Maritime vessels in the bay. Interestingly, it was flat, calm, and sunny. We had our coats off on the back deck of the vessel, and everyone was a bit disappointed because they were expecting to see these very high wind speeds, but they understood it's typically a very, very windy place. But when we started to look at the numbers and talk about the site, the CEO of a significant renewable energy provider who's got a significant amount of installed capacity globally and has been in the business for over 10 years, said, "I have never seen onshore wind speeds as high as this anywhere in the world."
Yeah.
It's just very unique. It's actually higher than the offshore wind speeds in the immediate area because of the terrain. You're up higher,
Right.
and the wind's blowing stronger there, and we're in the middle of the ocean, really and truly. So it is an interesting situation from the resource perspective.
Another question that we wanted to ask you is that we're always interested in the economic impact of projects like yours in terms of the jobs and income and produced for the community in the province. Do you have any? Have you done any kind of economic impact study for your project that you can talk about?
Yes, yeah, we retained a top-notch firm to handle that task for us, and they produced an excellent report. It's it's significant. You know, the jobs are going to be 2,200 direct construction jobs. There'll be 400 approximately during operations, and the numbers work out to about 4,200 indirect jobs. It will boost the project will boost provincial GDP by 2.5 billion over the first 3 years of development. And again, we expect this to continue as we build out the other sites in the future. It'll boost the federal GDP by about 3.6 billion over the first 3 years, and the capex investment will result in approximately 1.3 billion in household spending in local communities across the province during the construction phase. Tax revenues will be more than 800 million, and that's broken down 70 for municipalities, about 430 for the province, and about 410 for the federal government. So it's significant by I think anybody's standards.
And over what time frame are you talking about there for those revenues to governments? Just to put it in perspective.
These are over the first 3 years of the project. So the economic impact numbers that I just ran through were based on that.
The first three years.
Yeah, and if you think about our plans for continuing to build, that'll increase and escalate over time.
Thanks.
Yeah. So Don, I think you were aware that I actually did that work a few months ago
Oh, I forgot about
for
that.
World. So that's
Oh,
in the interest of full disclosure. I would
oh
say
yeah.
we were very rigorous with the analysis. We backed out the cost of the imports, which is always a challenge when you're doing these projects. You don't want to pretend to take economic value or credit for the manufacturing of the turbine. So we took out all those pieces, the
Right.
electrolyzers, and everything that was left ended up with what Sean was talking about. So
Hmm.
just in the interest of full disclosure, I appreciate that. Sean, do you have a sense of what the average wage, or at least the wage range, are these going to be pretty good paying jobs?
They will be high paying jobs. I'd rather not quote any numbers here right now because we're just not that far along. But certainly the construction jobs will be extremely competitive. Like, in order to attract the labor force that we need to execute, and again, we're envisioning that this labor force will be working on this project for many, many years beyond the initial 3-year time horizon. We need to have excellent work camps, very high standard in all respects, and that'll attract the right workforce in conjunction with a competitive wage by any region standard, and that'll also hopefully drive the retention of that workforce and keep them there once they're there. We do expect a lot of folks from the region that are working in other areas that will want to come home as well, but obviously that will be based on them getting a competitive wage, and being competitive with any other region again, certainly in Canada. So we're keenly focused on that. And then the flipping over to the direct operations jobs long term, they'll definitely be high paying jobs. This is the industry of the future. These are the jobs of the future. We're promoting the initial training programs, supporting the initial training programs at the College of the North Atlantic through scholarships for the first cohort of hydrogen technician and wind turbine technician students. And when they come out, they will have jobs that will be amongst the leading jobs in the area.
So I wanted to ask you about the community response. So we heard there was some pushback, some concern over this many turbines. We also have heard that there's been a lot of support, including a big a positive rally with like 1,500 people or something in November. Can you give our listeners a sense of how the community has responded to this project?
Sure. It's, with any large project, you get questions and concerns that need to be addressed. And we've worked hard to be as available as possible, bring the right experts in for community meetings. The Stephenville office, community office, has been very, very busy, where we've got maps and technical information and people on site that can answer a variety of questions. I've been out to the community meetings myself and participated in most of them. And our takeaway is we have a significant amount of support in the area. A lot of people that had questions or concerns that have had them answered satisfactorily are supportive of the project. I think the rally that you mentioned really speaks volumes. 1,500 people came out to that rally, and it was snowing sideways. Wasn't a pleasant day, but they really showed their support, and all the heavy equipment, that trucks that were lined up on the road, really made a stunning visual impression. And I think a lot of people took that as a strong sign for the supports that's there. We've been meeting with community members since spring of 2022. That's when we held our first meetings with the technical experts present. We've had community meetings prior to that, more around introducing the project, where we really started to focus on responding to the questions and the concerns was during that time frame. And I'm repeating myself to a certain extent here, but as people learn more about the project, they become supportive of the industry and the benefits it'll bring. And they understand it's a green industry. I mean, this is what's needed globally. Not everybody is a fan of having a wind turbine close to where they're living. But if you drive around the U.S., you drive around Europe. I mean, this is part of life. And having a green energy industry stood up in this province and being able to capture a first mover advantage in green hydrogen is just a massive opportunity. I don't think it's really set in with the general population how big of an opportunity this is. So we're down to what we believe is a small vocal minority that are, maybe not just opposed to our project, but a lot of development in the area. And we respect their views. We continue to be open to interacting with them and answering their questions and trying to get to a place where we would have 100% support. But the reality is we've got a significant amount of support, and we really appreciate the efforts that people are making to show government that they want the project and they want it to happen as soon as possible so that we can capture that first mover advantage.
Well, we recently interviewed John Davis, the CEO of the Halibu Holdings, the indigenous group that I think that you're working with, if I'm not mistaken. And he talked about the green energy opportunity from a First Nations perspective. Can you talk to us about the relationship that you have with First Nations with regard to this project, Sean?
Sure. I mean, how the Alibu have been a wonderful partner. We have a memorandum of understanding in place with Alibu at present. Discussions are advancing on specific agreements to specify the areas that they will be involved in the project. It's been publicly announced that the DOB Academy, that's the academy that John and I went to um, in late 2021 to understand more about the industry. They've opened an academy in Japan at the request of the Japanese government, and we're trying to replicate that in Stephenville. And they're working on a partnership with Alipu. That'll be a really exciting opportunity for um, providing community and industry training below the level of the College of the North Atlantic. And I don't mean below, meaning inferior to. If you look at the college as a diploma granting institution with the courses that they've started to deliver, the DOB Halibu Academy will be focused on, again, that community industry awareness training, safety training for people going on site, and building that out from there. So that's an example of how we envision the relationship with the First Nations developing on the project, bringing them in, um, building opportunities together that will have a real legacy. And hopefully, the DOB Alibu Academy can be utilized in other areas and other projects, that expertise that they're creating. So we're quite excited about the various activities that we've identified that Alibu will be participating in, and within the region, there's local bands that we're in discussions with as well, and it's quite exciting to see the level of support and engagement that we have in general.
Well, this is probably the biggest large-scale capital investment in Western Newfoundland since perhaps the pulp mill went in, I don't know, 50 years ago, maybe, or more.
Yeah.
Um, so, is there a plan in place to ensure that you have the workforce needed, for the capital investment phase of the project? Because like most of Newfoundland, it's an older population. It's been aging for a while. It hadn't had much population growth until only recently. And so what's your plan to make sure you have the labor force that you need, Sean?
So the number one question we get when we go into the community, and the number one reason for the visit to the community office is what are the jobs? When can I start working? For particular individuals, but you'd be surprised at the amount of parents that are coming to us and saying, "Look, what are the opportunities going to be? I have children working away. They want to come home. They're excited about this, and they're trying to get an understanding of it to pass on to their family and get them back home. It's it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds, but the indications are that there's an abundance of individuals that want to come back and live in the community, be part of the construction phase, many that want to be part of the ongoing direct operational jobs as well. We've got a number of contractors, partners, we'll call them, that have been involved in the project since the early stages, and these companies, many of which you know, strong Atlantic Canadian companies, are working in different regions and have said, one in particular, just one of these contractors said, we have about 600 people that are from the West Coast that are working in different areas, and all of them, most of them, want to come back and work on this project. So we expect that to be significant for us. Again, we've got to make sure that we've got excellent accommodations, excellent services. We're looking at work camps that are first class, that have individual en suites, excellent workout facilities. Of course, the food needs to be top notch, but maintenance people to take care of electrical and plumbing issues and that sort of thing need to be available and delivering service at a very high standard. Uh, and we talked about this a bit earlier, but it's worth repeating. That's what's going to drive the attraction and the retention of those individuals. That including ensuring we're paying a competitive wage. So we believe we've got some advantages there. I'll point to one of the wind turbine technician students, a gentleman named Alex White, who has interfaced with us on the project from day one. Alex actually accompanied Laura Barron and I up to see a wind farm in Ontario that we took a number of the port-to-port representatives to, so they could actually see the turbines in a community. And Alex did his due diligence. He did his homework. He's a very intelligent young man. He had come back to the Port-au-Port Peninsula during COVID, and when we awarded the scholarships at the College of the North Atlantic, he got up and spoke, and he talked about his experience and about what it meant to him to be able to come home and have this kind of opportunity available to him. You'll see videos on our social media channels with the similar message from all kinds of different people. So as much as on the face of it, you're very accurate. There's all those challenges with the demographic in the region at present. We think we're going to change that.
That's awesome. So I wanted to ask you, you talked a little bit earlier about how you're in discussions with some of the big suppliers of wind turbines, but we do hear there are shortages and perhaps longer wait times for this equipment, the turbines, the electrolyzers, etc. Are you concerned that this might impact the timeline for this project, or do you have a pretty good confidence you'll be able to secure the raw materials, products that you're going to need for the project?
Great question. So the long lead items for this project are critical. HVDC equipment is in short supply globally. That's a key part of it that people don't think of immediately. But the wind turbines are key, and the electrolyzers are key as well. The ammonia tanks are another one that we need to get out in front of, and we are out in front of. We've invested a significant amount of time in building the relationships with all of the large OEMs that can supply equipment to the project. These are the Siemens of the world, Vestas of the world, and we've got personal relationships with these people now that have been developed over a period of time. It was important to do that because there was 450 some projects on McKinsey's map, and all of them were vying for quotations from these companies. So we've actually had to go and spend a fair bit of time with them, invite them to the site. We had the advantage of having, our prime minister and the German chancellor come to Stephenville. So, that put us on the map in a significant way and allowed us to open some doors fairly conveniently. And of course, John Risley and Brendan Paddock and Gene's reputations in the overall business community are important with to that as well. But we've been successful in having manufacturing slots available to us based on our timeline, which continues to be iterated. And we feel good about our ability to secure the equipment in the window that we have now. And this is extremely important. All of these OEMs have said to us, well, we know your project's advancing, very serious. They are waiting to see the details on the federal government support, whether there will be contracts for different programs in place for the first mover projects, which was something in the last budget, as you're probably aware of. Details on that still aren't available, so we get questioned on that a fair bit. And then, of course, the environmental assessment process is the provincial government, but behind the industry, and is that going to move along as well? So those question marks are there, and we manage those discussions. On the other side of that, you have the U.S. IRA and the potential for projects to start to move very quickly there. There's some challenges with the new rules for the U.S. organizations for exports, but there's still going to be a huge amount of activity generated from those subsidies that are going to be available. So once those projects start to become funded with the U.S. subsidies, there will be a run on all of this equipment, the electrolyzers, the turbines, the HVDC equipment, and the window will close on us. So the rules are being formalized now in the U.S., and we've got a limited amount of time here to hold our position with these OEMs on the long lead items. So we're keenly focused on that, and that's one of the things that we talk to all levels of government about is the urgency around those items in particular. I mean, offtake is very important as well, and we need to be a first mover from an industry perspective. But equally as important is having the equipment to be able to build the project and produce.
Wanted to just shift a little bit to the supply chain opportunities that this project will create, not just in Western Newfoundland, but maybe across the province and indeed the whole region, I think, Sean. What are the best opportunities? There's a really strong oil and gas industry in Newfoundland, for instance. I'm sure that there's some crossover opportunities for suppliers in that regard and perhaps in the mining field as well. But what are the best opportunities for local supply chain?
Where would I start? I mean, with a project like this, it's massive. Think about security services, laundry, catering, a lot of the stuff, as you mentioned, that we're doing in oil and gas, and we've got a world class supply chain here because of the oil and gas industry. It's remarkable the talent that we have here locally working in the industry, and many of those folks have gone to very senior positions and abroad with some of these energy majors. So we feel fortunate to have that road paved to a certain extent, if you will. The engineering work that we're going to ramp up and require for this is absolutely massive. I mean, the reality is there won't be enough vendors to supply the all of the services that are we're going to require. Some of it's going to have to be imported, but we're committed to providing as much opportunity as we can for the local community, and that includes developing some of these companies as well with some of this new technology that we require that we're going to have to operate. So, I'm being a bit general in my response, but it really is a massive opportunity when you think about the construction effort that will be going on for many years.
You mentioned earlier that you're just waiting for final approval for the environmental plan that you put in, and they asked for some, I guess, updates or revisions to that plan. When do you anticipate getting approval that you can proceed with this project? Do you have a hopeful time frame that you're looking at?
We do. We hope to have all the information assembled for the amendment, the submission that will address the additional information that the Environmental Assessment Committee has required, and submit that somewhere toward the end of this month, January. And at that point, the legislative timeline starts, and there's a 50-day public consultation period again, and then a window for the minister to make a determination as to whether we'll be released and able to move forward. So we're hopeful that somewhere in March we would get a favorable decision from the minister and be able to start moving things along in earnest.
Sean, you've talked about a lot of the different moving parts associated with this project. I'm impressed by the scale and the all of the different things you have to be thinking about here in this project. But we wanted to ask you one last sort of big question here around: are there any potential roadblocks to this project that you want to share with us? You want to share with the listeners? Anything that comes to mind that could be a big roadblock or to moving this project forward?
Well, we've made a massive amount of progress in a short period of time, a relatively short period of time, on de-risking the project, and the de-risk milestones are significant that we've moved through, which is why we have SK interested and invested in the project last May, and have other parties that are interested as well. It's quite remarkable the interest that we do have in the project due to the progress we've made and the uniqueness of the site. So if you think about those stakeholders that are interested in investment, you've got stakeholders interested in offtake, and then you have the OEMs, which we just talked about in a fairly high level of detail. They're all looking at those remaining de-risk milestones that are significant. That is, getting released from the environmental assessment process, ensuring there's full clarity on the federal government support for the industry, with the ITCs and the CFDs. And those are the two big items, that, or two or three, if you want to call it that we're focused on. That could be roadblocks if they went the wrong way. We believe that the offtake agreement is going to come in due course, once they see these de-risk milestones being cleared. And that's based on the earlier part of our discussion, where we talked about the fact that the world is recognizing there's going to be an undersupply of green hydrogen for the foreseeable future.
So the federal tax credits, that was actually developed in the last, I guess, in the last budget to actually respond to the U.S. IRA, and there was some confusion around how it's going to be implemented. How long do you think before you think the federal government is going to sort of settle on what that actually looks like, and you have clarity on the federal participation?
So we had some more progress in the fall economic statement. And I want to say, we're extremely impressed with the way the federal government and the provincial government have worked to move this industry along. Having said that, it can't move quickly enough, and we're at a very critical point right now where we need it to move even faster. So we're continuing to push on all fronts to make sure we've got clarity there. But to your question, I think the specifics are some time away, a number of months away. But we do have indications as to what those will be, and the federal government's being extremely supportive. And as we get new information, we're letting those stakeholders that I mentioned know what the updates are in real time, and ensuring they understand that all levels of government are committed to moving this along. But as you can appreciate, they still want to see the rubber directly on the road, and the details along with that.
So if listeners want to find out more about this project, where can they go? Do you have a website, social media? Where can people go to find out?
We've got certainly a website, worldenergygh2.com. We do a lot of our messaging on social media, primarily LinkedIn. It's a great channel we found to be very effective in keeping people informed. Got some great videos on there of people from the community talking about what the project means to them. There's a video of the project owners and partners, and they're all fairly short, so people may be interested in seeing those. Our corporate head office is at 235 Water Street in Scotia Centre on the 6th floor. People are welcome to come by here, and certainly the Stephenville community office at 13 Tennessee Drive in the airport in Stephenville is open, generally regular business hours, and our community relations folks are available to go to individuals' houses or communities upon request for people that might not be able to get to the community office. We try to be as accessible as possible, and those are the main channels.
Sean, we want to thank you for joining us today in the Insights podcast. I hope you realize what a generational project this is. We've talked about, the U.S. Army and the work that they did many, many decades ago, and Don mentioned the pulp mill. This is another industry that has that level of significance to the economy in Western Newfoundland. And we really appreciate you talking to us about it today, and we wish you all the best as you work on this opportunity for the people of Western Newfoundland and Labrador, but also the rest of Atlantic Canada. So thank you again.
Well, thank you, gents. It's been a pleasure being on your podcast, and we appreciate the opportunity and the interest in the project very much. And happy to come back for an update at a point where you may find it interesting. Thanks again.
Well, we'd like to do that, Sean, for sure. Thanks again.
You've been listening to the Insights Podcast from the Acadia Broadcasting Corporation. Follow the show and listen to past episodes on your favorite podcast platform, like Apple or Spotify. If you've enjoyed the show, why not recommend it to a friend? Don and David will be back next week with another deep dive into some key issues in Atlantic Canada.